The autumn air in Kansas City carried the crisp promise of football season as students at Westfield High School gathered around the practice field for what should have been just another Tuesday afternoon. The bleachers were packed with teenagers clutching their phone, ready to capture whatever drama might unfold during the varsity team's open practice session. Nobody expected to witness what would become the most viral moment of the year. Dexter Hawthorne stood at the edge of the field, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. At 16, he had spent countless hours studying game footage, memorizing plays, and dreaming of the moment he might finally get his chance to try out for the team. His knowledge of football strategy was encyclopedic, his passion undeniable, but there was one thing that made him different from every other hopeful player: the titanium carbon fiber prosthetic that replaced his right leg below the knee. He had lost his leg in a car accident when he was 12, but that tragedy had only intensified his love for the game. While other kids his age were playing video games or scrolling through social media, Dexter was analyzing defensive formations and perfecting his throwing technique in his backyard. His mother, Marlene, had driven him to this practice session despite her obvious concern, watching from the parking lot as her son prepared to face what might be the biggest moment of his young life. "Look what we got here," came a voice that made Dexter's stomach drop. Tyler Brennan, the team's starting linebacker and one of the most popular kids at Westfield High, was walking toward him with two of his teammates flanking him, like predators circling prey. "The Gimp wants to play football." The crowd on the bleachers immediately sensed drama and began pulling out their phone. Within seconds, dozens of cameras were pointed at the unfolding scene, live streaming to Instagram and TikTok, as teenagers sensed they were about to witness something worth sharing. "I'm here for the open tryout," Dexter said, trying to keep his voice steady, despite the tremor of fear that was creeping up his spine. "Coach Whitman said anyone could come." Tyler laughed, a cruel sound that echoed across the field. "Coach Whitman didn't know we'd have Inspector Gadget showing up. What's next? Are we gonna let blind kids play quarterback?" The other players, Jake Morrison and Danny Chen, circled closer, their expressions shifting from amusement to something more sinister. The crowd in the bleachers was growing, and Dexter could hear the excited chatter of students who sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary, though not in the way he had hoped. "Come on, guys, let's see what this robot leg can do," Jake said, reaching down toward Dexter's prosthetic. "Maybe it's got some kind of turbo boost." "Don't touch me," Dexter said, backing away, but there was nowhere to go. The three players had positioned themselves strategically, cutting off his escape routes like they were running a defensive play. "Oh, he's getting tough now," Danny laughed. "The cripple's getting an attitude." What happened next unfolded in slow motion, captured by dozens of phone cameras from multiple angles. Tyler grabbed Dexter by the shoulders while Jake dove for his prosthetic leg. The specially designed attachment that allowed Dexter to walk normally wasn't meant to withstand the kind of violent twisting motion that Jake applied to it. The prosthetic came loose with a sickening mechanical click, and Dexter crashed to the ground, his hands instinctively reaching out to break his fall. The impact sent a shock of pain through his arms and shoulders, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation that washed over him as he found himself sprawled in the dirt, while Tyler held his prosthetic leg above his head like a trophy. "Look, everybody!" Tyler shouted to the crowd, which had now grown to include nearly 100 students. "We got ourselves a real-life action figure, batteries not included." The laughter that erupted from the bleachers felt like a physical assault. Dexter could see phone screens everywhere, recording his humiliation for posterity and immediate distribution across social media. He tried to push himself up on his arm, but without his prosthetic, he couldn't generate the leverage needed to stand. "Please," he said quietly, reaching toward Tyler. "Please, give it back." "What's that?" Tyler cupped his ear dramatically. "I can't hear you from way down there, Stumpy." Jake picked up the prosthetic and examined it like it was some kind of alien artifact. "This thing is actually pretty cool. Too bad it's attached to such a pathetic loser." He tossed it to Danny, who caught it and immediately threw it toward the muddy area near the water cooler. The prosthetic landed with a splash in a puddle that had formed from the morning's rain, and Dexter watched in horror as his connection to mobility, his connection to normalcy, was treated like a joke. "Stop filming this!" Marlene Hawthorne's voice cut through the laughter as she came running from the parking lot. "Stop filming my son!" But it was too late. The damage was done, and the evidence was already being uploaded to every social media platform imaginable. Dexter could imagine the comments that would soon follow. Crying, laughing emoji, jokes about disabled kids thinking they can play sport, and the kind of casual cruelty that the internet specialized in delivering. As Dexter tried desperately to crawl toward his prosthetic, leaving a trail in the mud that only added to his humiliation, none of the 100-plus students who were watching made any move to help him. They were too busy capturing content, too entertained by the spectacle to remember that they were watching a human being suffer. That's when the voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "What the hell is going on here?" The authority in that voice was unmistakable, and it carried the kind of power that made everyone on the field freeze instantly. Travis Kelce had been visiting Westfield High as part of a charity with local school, and he had been walking toward the practice field when he heard the commotion. What he saw made his blood run cold. A kid was crawling through the mud, reaching desperately for what appeared to be a prosthetic leg, while three larger students stood over him laughing. The bleachers were packed with teenagers recording the whole thing on their phone, treating human suffering like entertainment. Kelce's face darkened with a fury that was both controlled and terrifying. Travis Kelce moved across the field with the purposeful stride of someone who had spent years commanding respect in high-pressure situations. The laughter died immediately as students recognized the NFL superstar, but the silence that followed was heavy with tension rather than star-struck excitement. "I asked you a question," Kelce said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet intensity that was somehow more frightening than shouting. His eyes moved from Tyler, who was still holding the prosthetic leg, to Jake and Danny, then to the crowd of students who were suddenly very interested in putting their phones. Tyler, who had been the picture of confidence moments before, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. "We were just, he wanted to try out for the team, and we were showing him that maybe football isn't for people like him." "People like him?" Kelce repeated, and there was something in his tone that made several students in the bleachers actually step backward. "You mean people who have the courage to chase their dreams despite facing challenges that would make most people quit?" Kelce knelt down next to Dexter, who was still sitting in the mud, tears of humiliation streaming down his face. Without saying a word, Kelce gently helped position Dexter so he could sit more comfortably, then stood up and walked over to Tyler. "Give me the leg," Kelce said simply. Tyler hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his option, but there was something in Kelce's presence that made resistance impossible. He handed over the prosthetic, which Kelce carried back to Dexter, with the same care he might show handling a piece of valuable equipment. "Let me help you with this," Kelce said quietly, kneeling down again. His voice had completely changed when addressing Dexter. Gone was the edge of anger, replaced by genuine concern. "What's your name, son?" "Dexter," came the whispered reply. "Dexter Hawthorne. Well, Dexter, I'm Travis Kelce, and I think you and I need to have a conversation." He helped Dexter reattach his prosthetic, handling the process with a matter-of-fact efficiency that somehow restored a measure of dignity to the situation. "But first, I need to address these gentlemen here." Kelce stood up and turned back to Tyler, Jake, and Danny, who were now looking increasingly uncomfortable as they realized their actions had been witnessed by someone whose opinion actually mattered in the world of football. "I want all three of you to understand something," Kelce said, his voice carrying across the field so that everyone could hear. "What you just did wasn't just cruel, it was the act of coward. You ganged up on someone who had the guts to try something difficult, and you tried to destroy his dreams because you were threatened by his courage." "We weren't threatened by him," Jake protested weakly. "He's got one leg. He can't play football." He's got one leg," Kelce agreed, "and more heart than all three of you combined. Do you know what I see when I look at him? I see someone who loves the game so much that he's willing to face people like you just for the chance to play it. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." The crowd was completely silent now, and Dexter could feel the energy on the field shifting. Phones were coming back out, but this time they were capturing a different story. Not his humiliation, but his defense by one of the most respected players in the NFL. "Coach Whitman!" Kelce called out, and the head coach came jogging over from where he had been watching the practice. "This young man wants to try out for your team. When can you fit him into your schedule?" Coach Bridger Whitman was a 30-year veteran of high school football who had seen everything the sport could throw at him, but even he seemed taken aback by the intensity of the situation. "Well, Travis, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but there are liability issues, and the school board has policies about—" "Coach," Kelce interrupted, "this kid knows more about football strategy than half the players I've worked with in the NFL. I can tell just from the way he carries himself, the way he watches the game. Give him a chance to show you what he can do." Dexter found his voice for the first time since the incident began. "I've been studying film for 4 years," he said, standing up with as much dignity as he could muster. "I know every play in your playbook, and I've created modifications that could work with my limitations. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a fair tryout." Something in his tone caught Coach Whitman's attention. The boy wasn't begging or making excuses. He was stating facts with the confidence of someone who had done his homework. "You know my playbook?" Whitman asked skeptically. "I know you run a modified spread offense with RPO elements, that you prefer cover 2 defense on 3rd and long, and that your biggest weakness is defending crossing routes over the middle because your linebackers are too slow to cover tight ends," Dexter replied without hesitation. A murmur went through the crowd. Even Tyler, Jake, and Danny looked surprised by the depth of knowledge the kid was displaying. Coach Whitman raised an eyebrow. "And what would you do to fix that weakness?" "Drop one of your safeties into a robber coverage underneath, but disguise it as cover 2 until the last second. Force the quarterback to make his read before he can see the real coverage," Dexter answered immediately. Kelce smiled for the first time since arriving on the scene. This kid wasn't just passionate about football. He understood it at a level that most high school players never reach. "Coach, I'll make you a deal," Kelce said. "Give Dexter a private workout. Just you, him, and me. If he can't prove that he belongs on this field, I'll personally contribute $25,000 to your athletics program. If he can prove it, you give him the same shot you'd give any other player." The offer hung in the air like electricity. Coach Whitman looked from Kelce to Dexter, to the crowd of students who were hanging on every word. "When?" Whitman asked simply. "Tomorrow after school," Kelce replied. 3 o'clock. Dexter felt a surge of hope that was almost overwhelming. After years of dreaming about this moment, after the humiliation he had just endured, he was actually going to get his chance. But as the crowd began to disperse and the immediate drama of the situation faded, the 3 players who had tormented him were already huddling together, their expressions dark with something that looked like planning. Tyler caught Dexter's eye and made a subtle gesture across his throat. The message was clear. This wasn't over. Marlene Hawthorne reached her son just as Kelce was preparing to leave, and she grabbed the NFL star's hand with both of hers. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what this means to him, what it means to our family." "Actually, I think I do," Kelce replied gently. "Your son has something special, Mrs. Hawthorne. Tomorrow, he's going to get the chance to show it." As Dexter walked off the field with his mother, his prosthetic functioning normally again, and his head held high for the first time all day, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. He was right, but not in the way he expected. The story of Dexter's confrontation with the bully and his subsequent encounter with Travis Kelce spread through Westfield High School like wildfire. By the next morning, multiple videos of the incident had gone viral on social media, with "Churn Justice for Dexter" trending nationally and thousands of comments pouring in from around the world. Most of the comments were supportive, praising Kelce for standing up to bullies and expressing admiration for Dexter's courage in pursuing his football dreams despite his physical challenge. But buried among the supportive message was a darker current of opinion. People who agreed with Tyler's assessment that disabled students had no place on football teams, that Dexter was setting himself up for failure and potentially putting other players at risk. Dexter tried to ignore the negative comments as he prepared for his private workout with Coach Whitman, but the doubt they planted in his mind was harder to shake than he had expected. What if they were right? What if he was being naive about his limitations? His best friend Jackson Ridley found him in the library during lunch period, hunched over a laptop and scrolling through the endless stream of social media reactions to the previous day's events. "Dude, you need to stop reading that garbage," Jackson said, sliding into the chair next to him. "Half these people couldn't even find Kansas City on a map, and they're trying to give you advice about football? But what if they have a point?" Dexter asked, closing the laptop with a frustrated sigh. What if I am being unrealistic? What if I get out there this afternoon and embarrass myself even worse than yesterday? Jackson studied his friend's face and recognized the self-doubt that was threatening to undermine everything Dexter had worked toward. Remember when you taught me how to throw a spiral in 7th grade? I couldn't get it right for weeks, and you never gave up on me. You kept showing me different grips, different release points, until I finally got it. That's who you are, Dex. You don't quit, and you figure out solutions. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Sterling Blackwood, the orthopedic surgeon who had been working with Dexter since his accident. Dr. Blackwood had seen the viral videos and had driven to the school during his lunch break to offer his support. "I brought you something," Dr. Blackwood said, setting an official-looking document on the table. "It's a comprehensive medical evaluation, certifying that you are fully cleared for contact sports, including football. I've also included a technical analysis of your prosthetic and how it's designed to handle the specific stresses of athletic activity." Dexter picked up the document and read through it carefully. Dr. Blackwood had been thorough, addressing every possible concern about safety and performance that skeptics might raise. "This is incredible," Dexter said. "Thank you so much, Dr. Blackwood." "Don't thank me yet," the doctor replied with a smile. "Thank me after you make the team." The private workout was scheduled for 3 o'clock, but word had somehow leaked out despite Coach Whitman's attempts to keep it quiet. By 2:45, a small crowd had gathered around the practice field. Not the massive audience from the day before, but enough people to make Dexter nervous. Travis Kelce arrived promptly at 3, carrying a bag of professional-grade equipment that he set down on the sideline. Coach Whitman was already on the field, his expression unreadable as he prepared to evaluate the most unusual tryout of his coaching career. "All right, Dexter," Kelce said, pulling various pieces of equipment from his bag. "We're going to start with some basic drills and work our way up. I want you to forget about everyone watching and just focus on showing Coach Whitman what you can do." The first drill was simple, catching passes from a stationary position. Dexter's hands were sure and steady, and he hauled in every throw that Kelce sent his way. His route running was crisp and precise, and he demonstrated an intuitive understanding of how to use his body position to create separation from imaginary defender. "Good hands," Coach Whitman noted approvingly. "Let's see him move a little." Kelce set up a cone drill that required quick changes of direction and precise footwork. This was where Dexter's prosthetic would either prove its or become a limitation, and everyone watching knew it. Dexter approached the drill with intense concentration, his movements careful but confident. The prosthetic responded perfectly to his intention, allowing him to cut sharply and maintain his balance even at high speed. He wasn't as fast as the natural athletes on the varsity team, but he was fast enough, and his understanding of angles and timing more than compensated for any difference in raw speed. "Impressive," Coach Whitman said, and Dexter felt a surge of pride at the genuine approval in his coach's voice. But the mood on the field changed dramatically when Tyler, Jake, and Danny appeared at the edge of the practice area. They weren't supposed to be there. This was meant to be a private workout, but they had apparently decided that they needed to witness Dexter's evaluation firsthand. "Coach, can we talk to you for a minute?" Tyler called out, jogging onto the field with his teammates behind him. Whitman looked annoyed at the interruption, but Tyler was one of his star players, and the politics of high school athletics meant that star players got heard when they wanted to speak. "What is it, Tyler?" Whitman asked impatiently. "Coach, we've been talking to our parents and some of the other players, and we have some serious concerns about this whole situation," Tyler said, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who was used to getting his way. "We're worried about liability issues, about what happens if he gets hurt, or if he hurts someone else." Jake stepped forward with a folder in his hand. "We've got a petition here signed by over 200 students, parents, and community members who think this is a bad idea. They're saying that if the school allows disabled students to play contact sports, they'll pull their support from the athletics program." Dexter felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. While he had been preparing for his tryout, Tyler and his ally had been organizing a campaign to ensure that he would never get the chance to succeed. Coach Whitman took the petition and flipped through it, his expression growing darker with each page. The signatures were real, and they represented a significant portion of the school's support base. "This is ridiculous," Kelce said angrily. "They're trying to destroy this kid's dreams based on ignorance and prejudice." "Seats, maybe so," Whitman replied, but I can't ignore this kind of community pressure. If I put Dexter on the team and something goes wrong, it's not just his future on the line, it's the entire program." Tyler smiled with satisfaction as he watched doubt creep into the coach's expression. "We're not trying to be mean, coach. We're just trying to protect everyone involved. There are other activities that would be more appropriate for someone with his challenge." Cheeky. The word challenges came out like an insult, and Dexter felt his carefully constructed confidence beginning to crumble. All around the field, he could see people nodding in agreement with Tyler's argument, and he realized that his dream was slipping away despite his successful performance in the drill. "I'm sorry, Dexter," Coach Whitman said finally. "You showed me some impressive skills today, but I can't take the risk. The school board would never approve it, and the community opposition is too strong." Dexter stared at the coach in disbelief. "But I did everything you asked. I proved I could compete." "You did," Whitman agreed sadly. "But sometimes being able to compete isn't enough. Sometimes the politics matter more than the performance." As Dexter walked off the field, his dreams shattered and his spirit broken, Tyler called out one final insult that cut deeper than any physical injury could have. "Hey, Dexter, thanks for the entertainment, but next time, maybe try chess club instead." The video of Dexter's successful tryout and his subsequent rejection due to community pressure went viral even faster than the original bullying incident had. Within hours, Let Dexter Play was trending globally. Celebrities, athletes, and disability rights advocates weighing in on what many saw as a clear case of discrimination. Travis Kelce found himself at the center of a media firestorm, with reporters calling him constantly for comments about the situation. But instead of giving interview, he was focused on something more important, figuring out how to help a young man whose dreams had been crushed by prejudice and cowardice. He drove to the Hawthorne residence that evening and found Dexter in his backyard, sitting alone on a picnic table and staring at the football he had been throwing against a net. The kid looked defeated in a way that broke Kelce's heart. "Mind if I sit down?" Kelce asked, approaching carefully. Dexter shrugged without looking up. "It's your world. I'm just living in it." "What does that mean?" "It means you tried to help me, and I appreciate it. But we both know how this story ends," Dexter replied bitterly. "The disabled kid doesn't get to play football. The disabled kid gets to watch from the sidelines and pretend that's enough." Kelce studied the young man's face and recognized something familiar in his expression, the look of someone who had been told that their dreams were impossible and was starting to believe it. "Can I tell you something about my rookie year in the NFL?" Kelce asked, settling onto the picnic table beside Dex. "Sure, why not? I was convinced I was going to be cut. Every practice, every meeting, I felt like I was one mistake away from being sent home. There were veterans who told me I wasn't tough enough, coaches who questioned whether I had the mental makeup to succeed at that level. I started believing them." Dexter finally looked at, "But you made it." "I made it because I stopped listening to people who wanted to define my limitations for me," Kelce replied. "I realized that the only person who gets to decide what I'm capable of is me. The same is true for you." "It's not the same thing," Dexter protested. "You were doubted because you were young and inexperienced. I'm being rejected because of something I can't change about myself." "You're right," Kelce agreed. "It's not the same thing. What you're facing is harder, and what you're trying to do requires more courage than anything I've ever attempted. That's exactly why I'm not going to let you quit." Before Dexter could respond, Kelce pulled out his phone and made a call. "Coach Williams? It's Travis Kelce. I need a favor." "No, a big favor. I've got a young player here who needs to work with someone who understands what it means to overcome obstacles. Can you meet us at the training facility tomorrow morning?" When he hung up, Dexter was staring at him with curiosity, replacing some of the despair in his expression. "Who was that?" "Coach Marcus Williams. He runs a program for adaptive athletes, people who've found ways to excel in sports despite physical challenges. He's going to help us turn you into the player you were meant to be." "Why are you doing this?" Dexter asked. "You don't even know me." Kelce was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer that question honestly. "Because yesterday, when I saw you crawling through that mud to get your prosthetic back, you didn't quit. You didn't give up or call for help. You just kept moving toward your goal. That told me everything I needed to know about who you are inside." He stood up and picked up the football that had been sitting beside Dexter. "And because I think you've got something special that the world needs to see, not despite your prosthetic, but because of everything you've had to overcome to get this far. The school will never let me play." Dexter said. You saw that petition. You heard Coach Whitman. Then we'll make them change their mind, Kelce replied with determination. But first, we're going to make sure you're so good that they can't ignore you, and so prepared that they can't question your safety. Over the next 3 weeks, Dexter found himself immersed in the most intensive training program of his life. Coach Williams introduced him to techniques specifically designed for athletes with prosthetic, helping him develop a style of play that maximized his strengths while minimizing any potential disadvantage. They worked on balance drills that improved his stability in contact situations. They practiced footwork patterns that allowed him to change direction quickly without putting excessive stress on his prosthetic. They studied film of professional athletes who had succeeded despite various physical challenges, learning from their innovations and adaptations. But the most important part of the training wasn't physical, it was mental. Coach Williams taught Dexter to see his prosthetic not as a limitation, but as a unique advantage that gave him a different perspective on the game. Other players rely on natural ability, Williams explained during one of their sessions. They've never had to think deeply about every movement, every step, every decision. You've been forced to become a student of biomechanics and strategy in ways they never will be. That makes you smarter, not weaker. Meanwhile, the media attention around Dexter's story continued to grow. ESPN ran a feature about discrimination in high school athletics. Sports Illustrated published an article about the importance of inclusion in competitive sport. College coaches began reaching out to express their support, and several offered scholarships, sight unseen, based purely on the character Dexter had demonstrated. But none of that mattered to Dexter as much as the moment, 3 weeks into his training, when Coach Williams pulled him aside and said the words he had been waiting to hear. You're ready. The plan they had developed was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Dexter would request one final tryout with the Westfield High team, but this time it would be open to the public and the media. He would demonstrate his skills not just for Coach Whitman, but for everyone who had signed that petition, everyone who had doubted him, and everyone who believed that disabled athletes didn't belong on the field. The pressure would be enormous, but Dexter was no longer the same young man who had been humiliated in front of his classmates a month earlier. He was stronger, faster, and more confident than he had ever been in his life. Most importantly, he finally understood what Travis Kelce had been trying to tell him from the beginning. The only limitations that truly mattered were the ones accepted for himself. One more thing, Kelce said, as they prepared to leave the training facility after their final practice session. Tomorrow, when you're out there proving all those people wrong, remember that you're not just playing for yourself. You're playing for every kid who's ever been told they can't chase their dreams because they're different. Dexter nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders like a familiar piece of equipment. He was ready to carry it. The night before, what had become known as Dexter's second chance, Travis Kelce found himself unable to sleep. He walked out onto the balcony of his Kansas City penthouse and stared out at the city lights, wrestling with doubts that had been growing stronger as the big day approached. Was he doing the right thing by encouraging Dexter to pursue this dream? The kid had already been through so much humiliation and disappointment. What if tomorrow's tryout went badly? What if, despite all their training and preparation, the reality was that high school football really wasn't the right place for someone with Dexter's physical challenges? Kelce pulled out his phone and scrolled through the hundreds of messages he had received about Dexter's story. Most were supportive, but there were enough dissenting opinions to plant seeds of doubt in his mind. Maybe you should encourage the kid to find a different path, one message read. You're setting him up for heartbreak and potentially serious injury. As much as I admire his spirit, some dreams just aren't realistic, said another. The kindest thing you could do is help him find a sport where he can actually succeed. These weren't messages from trolls or bullies. They were from coaches, parents, and athletes who genuinely believed they were offering wisdom born from experience. Their concern felt sincere, which made it harder to dismiss. Kelce thought about his own journey to the NFL and the moments when he had questioned whether his dreams were realistic. But his doubts had been about talent and competition, not about fundamental physical limitation. Was it fair to project his experience onto someone facing entirely different challenges? His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Jason, who had been following the story closely. Having second thoughts? The message read. How did you know? Kelce typed back. Because I know you. And I know you're probably up right now wondering if you're being cruel by encouraging this kid instead of protecting him from more disappointment. Jason's insight was uncomfortably accurate. That was exactly what Kelce had been thinking. "So, what do I do?" he replied. "You remember why you got involved in the first place," Jason responded. "It wasn't because you thought the kid would definitely make the team. It was because he deserved the chance to find out what he was capable of." Kelce stared at that message for a long time, understanding that his brother had cut straight to the heart of the matter. This wasn't really about whether Dexter would succeed or fail. It was about whether he would get the opportunity to discover his own limits, rather than having them imposed by others. The next morning, Kelce drove to the Hawthorne house to pick up Dexter for the tryout. He found the young man sitting on his front steps, fully dressed in workout gear but staring off into the distance with an expression that looked remarkably similar to what Kelce had been feeling the night before. "Second thoughts?" Kelce asked, echoing his brother's question from the previous evening. "Third and fourth thought," Dexter admitted. "What if I've been fooling myself this whole time? What if I'm just not good enough? Prosthetic or no prosthetic?" Kelce sat down on the steps beside him, recognizing that this conversation would be crucial to everything that followed. "Can I tell you what I've learned about you over the past month?" he asked. Dexter nodded. "I've learned that you study game film more thoroughly than most professional players. I've learned that you understand strategy and situational football at a level that impresses coaches with decades of experience. I've learned that you work harder than anyone I've ever trained with, and that you never make excuses when things get difficult." Kelce paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But most important, I've learned that you love this game in a way that's rare and beautiful. Not because you want glory or attention, but because football challenges you to be better than you thought possible. That kind of love doesn't care about prosthetics or community petitions or any of the other noise that people want to focus on. What if it's not enough?" Dexter asked quietly. "Then at least you'll know," Kelce replied, "and knowing is better than wondering for the rest of your life." They drove to Westfield High in contemplative silence, both men aware that the next few hours would determine whether the past month of work and hope had been worthwhile or foolish. The scene at the school was unlike anything either of them had expected. The parking lot was packed with cars, news vans, and people carrying signs that ranged from "Let Dexter play" to "Safety first" to "Inspiration over inclusion." The story had clearly captured national attention in a way that neither of them had anticipated. "This is crazy," Dexter said, staring at the crowd that had gathered around the football field. "This is your moment," Kelce replied. "All these people are here because your story matters to them. Some of them want to see you succeed. Some of them want to see you fail. But all of them care enough to show up. That's not crazy. That's the power of sport, to bring out the best and worst in people." As they walked toward the field, Kelce noticed something that made him smile despite his nervousness. Mixed in with the crowd were dozens of young people wearing prosthetic, using wheelchair, or showing other signs of physical challenges. Word of Dexter's tryout had apparently reached the broader disability community, and they had come to witness what could be a historic moment. "Look at that!" Kelce said, pointing toward a group of kids who were cheering enthusiastically as Dexter approached. "Those kids aren't here to see a football tryout. They're here to see someone like them refuse to accept limitations." For the first time all day, Dexter smiled with genuine confidence. "You're right," he said. "This isn't about making the team anymore. This is about showing everyone, including myself, what's possible when you refuse to quit." As they reached the edge of the field, Coach Whitman approached them with an expression that was difficult to read. The media attention had clearly put him in an uncomfortable position, caught between community pressure and national scrutiny. "Dexter," Whitman said, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens today, I respect what you're trying to do here. The way you've handled this whole situation has been impressive." "Thank you, Coach," Dexter replied. "I just want the chance to show you what I can do." "You'll get that chance," Whitman assured him. "We're going to run you through a full practice session with the varsity team. No special treatment, no modified drills. If you can keep up and contribute, then we'll talk about what comes next." As they walked onto the field together, Kelce noticed Tyler, Jake, and Danny huddled near the far sideline with several other players. Their body language suggested they were planning something, and the looks they kept shooting in Dexter's direction weren't friendly. "Keep your eyes on those three," Kelce murmured to Dexter. They're not done trying to sabotage you. The practice session began with basic conditioning drills, and Dexter immediately established himself as someone who belonged on the field. His endurance was excellent, his form was precise, and he kept pace with players who had been training together for years. During position drills, he demonstrated the route-running skills and football intelligence that had impressed Coach Whitman during their private workout. His catches were clean, his cuts were sharp, and his understanding of defensive concepts was evident in the way he found openings in coverage. But the real test came during 11-on-11 scrimmage situation, where Dexter would have to prove he could function effectively in the chaos and contact of actual game conditions. On his first play, running a crossing route over the middle, Dexter caught the pass cleanly, but was immediately hit by Tyler in what appeared to be a routine tackle. However, Kelce's trained eye caught something that the casual observers missed. Tyler had deliberately targeted Dexter's prosthetic leg with a twisting motion designed to cause the attachment to fail. The prosthetic held, thanks to the modifications that Dr. Blackwood had made, but the intent was clear. Tyler was trying to create the kind of equipment failure that would justify concerns about Dexter's safety and reliability. On the next play, Jake came in with a late hit that was borderline illegal, testing whether Dexter would crumble under physical pressure. Instead, Dexter bounced back up immediately and jogged back to the huddle without complaint or hesitation. By the third play, it was obvious to everyone watching that Dexter wasn't just surviving the contact, he was thriving in it. His lower center of gravity and exceptional balance, developed through years of adapting to his prosthetic, actually gave him advantages in traffic that natural athletes didn't possess. The turning point came during a red zone drill, with Dexter running a fade route toward the corner of the end zone. The quarterback threw a perfect pass, but Danny was in position to defend it aggressively. What happened next would be replayed on highlight reels for years to come. Instead of shying away from contact or trying to avoid the defender, Dexter used his superior route technique and body positioning to shield Danny from the ball, while making a spectacular one-handed catch. The prosthetic leg provided a stable base that allowed him to maintain his balance and hold onto the ball, even as Danny tried to knock it loose. The crowd erupted in cheers, and even some of the players who had been skeptical began applauding the impressive display of skill and determination. Coach Whitman pulled Dexter aside during a water break, his expression thoughtful. "I've got to ask you something," Whitman said. "How did you develop that kind of body control and spatial awareness? That catch was at a college level. I've had to think about every movement, every step, every shift since I was 12. Dexter replied. "When you can't rely on natural instinct, you have to become a student of physics and biomechanics. I know exactly where my center of gravity is at all times, and I know how to use that knowledge to my advantage." As the practice session continued, it became increasingly clear that Dexter wasn't just good enough to make the team, he was good enough to contribute immediately. His football IQ was evident in every play. His work ethic was inspiring his teammates, and his resilience in the face of targeted harassment from Tyler's group was earning him respect throughout the roster. The final test came during a full-speed scrimmage situation that would simulate actual game conditions. Coach Whitman divided the team into two squads, with Dexter assigned to the second-string offense against the starting defense, which included Tyler, Jake, and Danny. "This is where we find out what you're really made of," Tyler said, as the teams lined up for the first play. "No more kid gloves, no more special treatment. This is real football now." Dexter looked across the line of scrimmage and felt a surge of confidence that surprised him with its intensity. For the first time since this whole journey began, he wasn't nervous or intimidated. He was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The first play was a simple slant, but Tyler came charging across the formation with obvious intent to deliver a punishing hit. What he didn't expect was Dexter's reaction time and anticipation. Having studied film of Tyler's tendency for weeks, Dexter knew exactly when and how the linebacker would commit to his attack. Instead of trying to avoid the contact, Dexter adjusted his route slightly and used Tyler's momentum against him, catching the pass and immediately cutting upfield while Tyler overran the play. The result was a 15-yard gain and a clear demonstration that Dexter could not only survive contact with elite high school players, but could outthink and outmaneuver them. The second play was even more impressive. Running a comeback route against Danny's coverage, Dexter used a combination of precise footwork and superior route technique to create separation at exactly the right moment. When the ball arrived, he caught it cleanly and immediately turned upfield, using his low center of gravity to break Danny's tackle attempt and gain additional yardage. But it was the third play that changed everything. With the ball on the 20-yard line and the scrimmage situation calling for a touchdown, Dexter ran what appeared to be a standard fade route toward the corner of the end zone. Jake was in perfect position to defend the pass, and Tyler was providing safety help over the top. What they didn't anticipate was the route modification that Dexter had been perfecting during his training with Coach William. Instead of continuing straight to the corner, he planted his prosthetic leg with perfect precision and cut sharply back toward the middle of the field, creating instant separation from both defenders. The quarterback, recognizing the improvisation, delivered a perfect pass that Dexter caught in stride for a touchdown that left the entire defense looking confused and beaten. The crowd exploded in cheers, and this time the applause wasn't just from the spectators, it was from his teammates, including several members of the starting lineup who had been skeptical about his ability. "Holy cow," Jake said as he jogged past Dexter after the play. "Where did that move come from?" 4 years of studying film and 3 weeks of training with people who understand that different doesn't mean limit, Dexter replied with a smile that held no trace of arrogance, just quiet satisfaction. As the scrimmage continued, Dexter's performance only got better. He caught every pass thrown his way, ran crisp routes that consistently created separation, and demonstrated a level of football intelligence that impressed everyone watching. More importantly, he showed that he could handle the physical demands of the game without his prosthetic creating any safety issues for himself or other players. When Coach Whitman finally blew the whistle to end practice, the transformation in the atmosphere was remarkable. Players who had been hostile or skeptical were now approaching Dexter with genuine respect and admiration. Several of them asked questions about his training methods and route running techniques, treating him as a legitimate teammate rather than a curiosity. "Dexter," Coach Whitman called out as the team gathered around him, "I owe you an apology. I let community pressure and my own preconceptions cloud my judgment about what you were capable of. What you've shown me today is that you're not just good enough to make this team. You're good enough to help us win game." The words that Dexter had dreamed of hearing for years were finally being spoken, but his reaction surprised everyone, including himself. "Coach, I appreciate that more than you know," he said, "but I need to say something to everyone here." He turned to address the entire team, his voice carrying clearly across the field. "A month ago, I would have done anything just to be accepted onto this team. I thought that making the roster would prove that I belonged, that I was just as good as everyone else despite my prosthetic." He paused, gathering his thoughts as he looked around at the faces of his teammates. "But I've learned something over the past few weeks that's more important than making any team. I've learned that I don't need anyone else's approval to validate who I am or what I'm capable of. I'm not trying to prove that I'm just as good as anyone else. I'm trying to be the best version of myself, and that's something completely different." Tyler, who had been conspicuously quiet since his defensive strategies had been systematically dismantled during the scrimmage, stepped forward with an expression that looked like genuine remorse. "Dexter, I owe you an apology too," he said. "What I did to you that first day, and the way I've been trying to sabotage you ever since, was wrong. I was threatened by your knowledge of the game and your dedication, and I tried to use your prosthetic as an excuse to keep you off the team. That was cowardly." "Appreciate that, Tyler," Dexter replied, "but I need you to understand something. You didn't almost keep me off this team because of my prosthetic. You almost kept me off this team because you made me doubt myself. The prosthetic was never the real obstacle. My own acceptance of other people's limitations was." As the crowd began to disperse and the media conducted their interview, Travis Kelce pulled Dexter aside for a private conversation. "How do you feel?" Kelce asked. "Grateful," Dexter replied without hesitation. "Not just for making the team, but for everything this experience has taught me about myself and what I'm capable of." "And what's that?" Dexter thought for a moment before answering, his prosthetic leg planted firmly in the grass of the field where he had once been humiliated and where he had now triumphed. I learned that the only real disability is believing that you can't. Everyone has limitations. Mine just happened to be visible. But visible limitations force you to find creative solutions, to work harder, to think deeper. In a lot of ways, my prosthetic didn't hold me back. It made me better. See, 6 months later, Dexter Hawthorne was not only a starter on the Westfield High varsity football team, but he had been named team captain and was being recruited by several major college programs. His story had inspired adaptive sports programs across the country and had led to policy changes that made high school athletics more inclusive for students with disability. But perhaps the most important change was in Dexter himself. The young man who had once crawled through the mud to retrieve his prosthetic, while classmates laughed and filmed, had become someone who understood that his greatest victories weren't measured by touchdowns or accolades, but by his refusal to accept anyone else's definition of what was possible. The thing about limitations, he said during a national television interview that aired at the end of his senior season, is that most of them exist only in our mind. My prosthetic leg isn't what almost kept me from playing football. My acceptance of other people's fears and prejudices was. Once I stopped listening to people who wanted to define my boundaries for me, I discovered that the only real limit are the ones we choose to accept.